Dear Jeff, as I sit down to put my thoughts into words, I can't help but feel a mix of emotions swirling within me. Leaving you wasn't an easy decision, and I hope you understand that it's not about blame or resentment. It's about acknowledging the changes that have occurred within me, and recognizing that I owe it to both of us to address them honestly. Our journey together has been filled with moments of joy, laughter, and shared experiences that I will always treasure. From the early days of our relationship to building a life together, we've weathered storms and celebrated triumphs side by side. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of myself amidst the familiarity of our routine. I want you to know that this decision isn't a reflection of your worth or our love for each other. It's about me needing to rediscover who I am outside of our relationship. I've spent so long defining myself in relation to you that I've neglected my own dreams and desires. Leaving you this letter is my way of being honest with both of us. I couldn't bear to see the hurt in your eyes or hear the pain in your voice as I try to explain these feelings. It's not fair to either of us to prolong the inevitable, and I hope you can find it in your heart to understand. I wish you nothing but happiness and fulfillment in the days ahead. You deserve someone who can love you wholeheartedly, without reservation or hesitation. And I hope that someday we can look back on our time together with fondness, grateful for the lessons learned and the memories shared. Take care of yourself, Jeff. You'll always hold a special place in my heart. I realize that what I'm about to say might come across as hypocritical and selfish, but the truth is, it is selfish, and that's why I've made the decision to leave. I crave the excitement of pursuing someone new, the thrill of a fresh romance, and unfortunately, you can't provide that anymore. When we were younger, you were irresistible. Playing guitar with Buddy in the band, riding your Harley in that hot leather jacket, your blonde hair flowing in the wind as you swept me off my feet on the dance floor, whether it was at a rock and roll club or in a ballroom. You created beautiful paintings of me and the kids. But over time, we became complacent in our relationship. The gigs with the band faded as you took on coaching soccer. The Harley now sits idle in the garage beneath the kids' sports gear in front of the minivan, and my knees can't keep up on the dance floor anymore. Though you still have that beautiful hair. Now that the kids are grown, I no longer feel comfortable with the minivan lifestyle that you seem to have embraced. I want to assure you that I haven't cheated on you, and you remain the only man I've ever been romantic with. However, I have found myself drawn to other men. Before I considered any further actions, I felt it was necessary to end things with you. I couldn't bear the idea of betraying your trust by sneaking around behind your back. Jeff, I've always loved you too much for that. I'm certain our paths will cross again, but I have no desire to discuss this matter with you. I've already spoken with Sam and asked him to handle our divorce proceedings. He's prepared the necessary paperwork, leaving you with everything except my clothing and personal belongings, which I've already taken. I've also agreed to split my pension with you and take on half of our debts, excluding the mortgage. It's only fair, after all, I played a role in incurring those debts, and I want to ensure fairness. Please grieve in private so that when we attend events for the kids, we can avoid any unnecessary drama. However, I believe in fairness, so if you feel the need to respond, I promise to read your letter carefully and respect your thoughts. With love, Ellen.
I pored over the note repeatedly, rooted to the spot in the kitchen where I found it. Tears hadn't come. Not yet. I was too numb. There were no signs of this impending revelation, no expression of dissatisfaction, no indication of desires unmet, no arguments, and no hints of another man in her life. We shared touches, kisses, smiles, all the gestures of a couple planning a future together. In fact, I had spent the past year wooing her, attempting to reignite our passion now that our youngest had left for college. I bought jewelry, only to be scolded for its expense. She preferred chocolate. I relinquished control of our closeness, believing I was causing her stress by initiating lovemaking. She insisted that holding hands sufficed. Perhaps she did drop a hint, but I brushed it off, attributing it to her adjusting to middle age. So there I stood, the last to realize. I grabbed a beer and stepped into the shower simultaneously. After finishing one, I reached for two more and returned to the shower, leaving behind a trail of water on her floors without fear of reprimand. I drank with determination to exhaust my stash, although like wine enthusiasts cellar their wines, I stored fine beers. While I didn't dent my beer collection, if I had, I'd have turned to my wines. However, I did make a significant impact on my consciousness. The next morning, I awoke with a throbbing headache, lying undressed on the basement floor after the shower. I stumbled upstairs, purged everything I'd consumed, crawled into bed, and wept. When I was 11, my grandmother passed away. During her wake and funeral, Grandpa took me aside and imparted wisdom. You have 3 days to mourn a loss. As God resurrected the dead in 3 days, you can resurrect your life. Cry, scream, vent your frustrations. When you're old enough, have a drink, engage in a good brawl, pray. Allow yourself these actions, then move forward. Honor the departed by progressing. A man doesn't dwell on a past he's lost. He lives in the present he's shaping and the future he's moving toward. Grandpa's words resonated deeply. I viewed my wife's departure as the end of our marriage. I wept, drank to excess, battered sheetrock walls with my bleeding fists, and used furniture to release my anguish. I yelled, I kicked, I drank. I scarcely ate, justifying that beer consists of grain, yeast, and water, akin to bread, and wine is derived from fruit. There, my food groups condensed into 2 bottles. I was on summer break when she chose to leave, waiting until the day after the school year ended. It was a well-timed decision. But by the following Tuesday, I emerged from my mourning. The first thing I did was call my kids. Ellen had already informed them of her choice, and they had desperately tried to reach me. I was too intoxicated to pick up, but I reassured them I was all right. Then I set about tidying up the house and arranged for my favorite charity to collect a truckload of donations. I had no intention of holding on to the remnants of a failed marriage. I kept only the family heirloom furniture, boxing up photos and albums for the kids. Everything else was treated the same way, with the ridiculous knickknacks meeting their end in the trash. What did I care about Spanish pottery or brass cats from Portugal? Over the next couple of days, I made trips to Home Depot, stocking up on flooring, carpet, paint, and new sheetrock. My aim was to transform the house into my own space. The pink and coral walls and frilly curtains were a thing of the past. I also visited Sam's and completed the divorce paperwork. Since it was uncontested with only one lawyer involved, he said it would likely be finalized around the time school resumed. I sold the minivan and traded it in for a '76 Triumph Spitfire convertible, just as I had always dreamed. It was British racing green with beige leather upholstery and chromed wire wheels. After clearing out the garage of unused clutter, unpacking the Harley was a breeze. Yet, the most significant decision I made was reaching out to Buddy. That call altered my life as swiftly as my wife's departure letter had just days before. Within half an hour of sharing my news with him, Buddy and the gang were at my doorstep. Buddy had been my closest friend since 3rd grade. We formed our band together, played sports together, took the same classes, and even double-dated. He had been my best man, and I was his. The collapse of my marriage was a profound blow to him, and he wouldn't allow me to navigate the upheaval of my domestic life alone. Our band had disbanded years ago due to life's demands, but our loyal supporters hadn't forgotten us. When I mention Buddy and the boys, it's more than just a handful of guys. We'd played at countless weddings, funerals, parties, and picnics, often offering our services at a discounted rate or for free because we cherished the community that followed us from gig to gig. Good deeds tend to breed more good deeds, and when news spread that I was overhauling my place to make it truly my own, the floodgates of generosity opened wide. Over the next fortnight, painters, carpenters, masons, plumbers, every imaginable tradesman pitched in to fix up much more than just my walls. Within a month, my house had undergone a complete transformation, both inside and out. There's something about a group of guys that attracts a crowd of girls. Their wives and girlfriends began dropping by Project Jeff's house to oversee the renovations, and soon they were bringing along their single friends for what we humorously dubbed Project Jeff's love life. No one was pushy in their matchmaking efforts. It was still too early for that. But it was evident that seeds were being planted, and before long I found myself out dancing and socializing 2 to 3 nights a week. Spontaneous barbecues and gatherings sprang up at my place, and I was never short of company, although I wasn't quite ready to dive into a new relationship before finalizing my divorce. Buddy floated the idea of resurrecting the band. In fact, he had already lined up gigs at clubs where we had old connections. Even before the fresh paint had dried on my walls, Buddy and Jeff made a triumphant return, headlining Friday nights at Jimmy's and commanding Saturdays at a cozy dance club downtown. He even booked us as a duo for Sunday afternoons at a popular seafood joint by the waterfront. It was as if we had never stopped playing together. We were all at similar stages in our lives, with our kids either grown or independent. We all looked pretty sharp and still had our own hair, well, except for Ronnie, our drummer. We hit the ground running. Our loyal fan base emerged from hibernation, eagerly paying their covers to pack the venues every single night. Whenever my sons had the chance, they'd drop by to lend a hand with the renovations, occasionally even joining in with the band. I ensured they understood not to disclose anything to their mom about me and to be truthful if she asked. They conveyed that Dad had been upset initially, but has since moved forward and is doing well. My daughter, living in Australia with her fiancé, received similar instructions. I trusted my kids implicitly to honor my wishes, and I knew they were being honest when they assured me that Ellen was kept in the dark about my well-being. To combat loneliness, I focused on cultivating healthy habits, revamping my diet, and ramping up my exercise regimen. I'd never let myself go out of shape, but now I attacked the pool with gusto and hit the road, whether running or biking, with renewed determination. Every evening before heading off to a gig, I'd hit the weights, alternating between leg days and upper body workouts. Within a month of Ellen's departure, I had rebuilt my home, my social circle, my daily schedule, my relationship with my children, and my physique. It seemed only fitting to respond to her letter. After all, she had initiated the conversation, hadn't she? Dear Ellen, thank you. You were right. Goodbye. Jeff. I sent the email to her. Short and to the point, it conveyed everything I needed it to. I didn't bother seeking out her new address, and truth be told, I didn't really want it. Rumors floated around about her, whispers of her involvement with a younger man who drove a flashy car and had a silver tongue. They'd been spotted together at shore clubs and beaches. Whenever someone tried to fill me in on her life, I politely declined to listen. But among our shared friends, these snippets pieced together a narrative of a whirlwind romance that spanned from September to June, or perhaps October to June, or even November to May. But none of it mattered to me. I genuinely wished her well. Grandpa's 3-day rule had guided me through, and I was content with the person I had become, too enamored with my present self to dwell on the past, us. The end of summer marked a melancholy reality for teachers like me, but August was ablaze with musical opportunities. This year was no different. Buddy and I found ourselves booked for festival after festival straight through September. Labor Day saw us performing 2 to 3 times a day. The hectic schedule kept me from checking her emailed response. It wasn't a deliberate snub. I simply thought our exchange was meant to be brief, a way to tie up loose ends, just as she wanted. I was too engrossed in the whirlwind of events and having too much fun to bother with email. In fact, I had almost forgotten about my marital woes when Sam called with news that our divorce proceedings had expedited. As it turned out, a certain clerk with connections to a family court judge was a fan of our band. I was set to be officially single come Friday. After a month and a half of transformative experiences, Friday would mark my return to bachelorhood. We were slated to perform at an arts festival and street fair in town, and suddenly all those scantily clad women with short skirts and plunging necklines were fair game. Cool. The street was packed when we hit the stage. We cranked up the amps to outdoor settings and unleashed our hard-driving blues style. We played covers, belted out originals, and jammed out impromptu tunes, getting the crowd fired up and dancing. It felt exhilarating. The guys had rummaged through our archives and unearthed our old masters from back in the day. We never got around to recording an album before life got in the way. But now we had enough material to fill a couple of makeshift albums. CDs were much easier to produce than vinyl, and we compiled a mix of old and new tracks that flew off the sales table. I was receiving looks from women of all ages, signaling that I was more than ready to end my dry spell. Amidst the chaos, I didn't notice Ellen attempting to sneak backstage, as I slung my guitar onto the back bar of my bike, which I had modified years ago for guitar transport. I missed her rushing toward me. I also missed the moment her face fell upon seeing another woman, Michelle, a busty blonde in her 30s, swinging her leg to sit behind me. It was the first time in the entire 25-year life of my bike that someone else had occupied that seat. I didn't see a tear form in Ellen's eye as I drove away from her. I wish I had. Michelle was incredible. I won't delve into explicit details of our encounter or the intensity of our physical connection. You can find that in another story. Let's just say, I pursued her relentlessly throughout the night, rebounding like a teenager and reaching heights of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in ages. I completely wore her out. By the end of the night, she thanked me for our time together, but suggested I not call her again, perhaps wary of the recovery time needed after our escapade. I knew I couldn't avoid Ellen forever, and I didn't. The next time I saw her was at our regular Friday night gig at Jimmy's. She walked in with her new companion and another couple, and they found a table and ordered drinks. As soon as I spotted her, I signaled to the band that we were deviating from our prepared set list. We had a tradition of playing American Woman whenever we spotted an ex-girlfriend in the crowd, and it was always the wronged guy who took the mic. It was our way of standing in solidarity with our friend. We firmly believed that dating an ex of one of us was off limits, and we never crossed that line. As I began playing the guitar riff in the slower, soulful style that Lenny Kravitz had popularized with his cover of the tune, I found myself enjoying American Woman more than ever before. Pouring my heart and soul into the lyrics, the guitar solos resonated with the crowd, igniting their energy. Unaware of Ellen's reaction, I didn't witness the moment her face fell upon realizing the song was directed at her, but Buddy's wife observed it. Later, she recounted how tears welled in Ellen's eyes as I sang lines like "Stay away from me" and "Go on and let me be," with emotions flowing freely. Ellen left before the song ended, barely maintaining her composure. Meanwhile, her companion and friends stayed behind, continuing to drink and dance into the night. It was evident that trouble was brewing in paradise. A week later, my older son paid me a visit with some intriguing news. It seemed Ellen and her boy toy had a falling out that same night. He was growing weary of her charms, while she struggled to keep up with the energetic lifestyle, both carnally and otherwise, of a man in his 20s. He voiced frustration over Ellen avoiding venues where we performed. Word had spread that the band was back in action, drawing crowds wherever we played. Additionally, he was displeased to learn that Ellen had relinquished her rights to our property in the divorce and had been planning to move into my house. I had suspected him of gold digging, but his audacity was staggering. Perhaps he was unaware of our prenuptial agreement, a precautionary measure devised by Ellen's father, who harbored suspicions about any man's intentions toward his daughter. I had readily agreed to it, as I had no intention of causing her injury. The agreement stipulated that if either of us left the marriage for greener pastures, we forfeited all rights to the family assets, leaving them entirely to the other party. It was likely Ellen remembered this agreement, which might explain why she proposed such an amicable divorce settlement. After Boy-Toy sent her packing, Ellen spent the following night in tears, pouring her heart out to the kids over the phone. I sympathized with her plight, but I had already gone through my 3 days of mourning for my marriage and was now free to offer support without being emotionally entangled. However, the kids weren't pleased with my detached attitude. They still saw me as unattached and believed I should welcome their mom back into the family home, at least temporarily, to help her get back on her feet. But I disagreed. Taking her in would mean dealing with the inevitable mood swings that came with menopause, a challenge I had already experienced during our marriage. Adding to that her feelings of rejection by Boy-Toy, the humiliation of crawling back to me, and potential guilt over leaving me in the first place was not something I was eager to handle on a daily basis. I was enjoying my newfound simplicity and independence too much to disrupt it. As days turned into weeks, the kids toned down their insistence to a more reasonable request for assistance, and I obliged by allowing them access to the storage unit I had rented for our furniture and belongings, which were too valuable to discard, until Ellen found a small apartment of her own. I even lent them the band's truck to help with the move. With the new school year in full swing and a busy schedule for the band, I rarely crossed paths with Ellen. Although we both taught in the same district, we worked in different school buildings, so our encounters were infrequent, and when they did happen, I barely took notice of her. I had become a popular topic of discussion in the rumor mill, perhaps due to the frequent appearances of my Harley or sports car, or maybe it was my increased activity level spilling over into school life, or simply my newfound status as an eligible bachelor. But rumors held little significance for me. The band was thriving. My barbecue parties were legendary for their good times, and I never lacked female companionship. Content as could be, I found myself not missing married life in the slightest. Flying to France for Thanksgiving was a long-held dream of mine, coinciding with the release of Beaujolais Nouveau, and this year, Thanksgiving fell early enough for the calendar to align perfectly. As I packed my bags, I was taken aback when my son called the night before I left, inviting me to a Thanksgiving dinner at Ellen's. He seemed genuinely upset when I explained I already had plans, but he quickly pivoted to suggesting that we host a family Christmas instead. He and his girlfriend offered to handle the cooking, with the condition that I provide the venue. He mentioned that all 3 kids would be coming into town and expressed their desire for a special day to reminisce. I agreed to the Christmas gathering on the condition that Ellen understood she wasn't welcome to bring a date and that I would dedicate my attention to the kids. I was surprised to learn from my son that Ellen wasn't dating at all and was actually quite lonely. Despite this revelation, I didn't delve further into her love life. My primary concern was ensuring a harmonious family gathering, without any awkwardness caused by a new romantic interest. I extended the invitation for them to stay at my home for as long as they wished, preferring that all the kids stay together rather than in a hotel. However, my son expressed concern that Ellen might feel uncomfortable leaving while everyone else stayed on. After mulling over his words, I realized that this reunion would be the first time our family could all be together since the kids moved out. I acknowledged that Ellen belonged there too. So, invite her to stay as well, I told my son. But she'll have to accept sleeping in the guest room, as I don't think it would be wise for her to stay in her old room. If you bring guests, they'll need to share your room or find accommodations elsewhere. Thanks, Dad. This means a lot to all of us, my son replied gratefully. Christmas that year fell on a Saturday, and the festivities began on Thursday night as everyone arrived. My daughter and her fiancé flew in from Australia, while my son and his girlfriend drove in from Boston, picking up my youngest, who was in college there. Ellen arrived about 10 minutes before them, and I observed her sitting in her car, seemingly nervous. Witnessing them all gather in the front yard, hugging and kissing, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sentimentality for the first time since emerging from my 3 days of mourning. As the 6 of them entered through the front door, they were met with a warm and welcoming atmosphere. It occurred to me that neither my daughter nor my ex-wife had set foot in the house since I remodeled it, so there was an element of surprise in their homecoming. Yet, I had adorned the house with Christmas decorations, much in the same fashion as we had done for years. Candles, nutcrackers, and centerpieces adorned the space, albeit now on my new furniture. The Christmas tree, adorned with old ornaments collected from vacations and handmade ones from the kids' art classes, stood proudly in its customary place. I had added a fireplace during the renovations, and its warm glow added to the festive ambience. The aroma of pine, crackling fire, and mulled cider enveloped the room. Plates of cookies and fudge dotted every available surface, and the table was set with the fine china that had been passed down from Ellen's grandmother as our wedding gift many years ago. It was evident that I had transformed our house into my home, and it was more than ready to host Christmas for my family. Despite everything that had transpired, they were undeniably my family. The kids, though grown, were still my flesh and blood, and despite our divorce, Ellen had held the key to my heart for most of my adult life. There was a flurry of excitement as they explored the house. I had restored the kids' bedrooms to almost exactly how they remembered, with minor updates such as toning down the hot pink in my daughter's room to a softer pastel shade. I had replaced their old single beds with comfortable queen sets, while preserving their childhood desk and dresser sets with new headboards to match. The spacious guest room had been converted into a studio, complete with a drafting table by the window for painting and ample space for musical instruments, amps, and recording gear. I'd also expanded one side of the ground floor, transforming a small library into a large room with a TV and pool table. The living room had been meticulously arranged around the new fireplace, now adorned with brand new Christmas stockings, one for each of us, including Ellen. The sight of the stockings sparked an instant rush of nostalgia in the kids. With mischievous grins, they darted towards their stockings, and in that moment, it was as if time itself reversed, and they became carefree children again, eagerly diving into the holiday spirit. The older two, with a touch of maturity, retrieved their partner's stockings as well, each recounting cherished memories the stockings evoked. Our tradition had always been to lovingly fill the stockings with small, inexpensive gifts and treats before moving on to the main presents under the tree. Soon, the air was filled with the sound of laughter and the rustling of wrappers as they nibbled on cookies and chocolates, donned silly novelty socks, and reveled in the joy of Christmas morning. "Dad, your stocking is empty! We didn't know, so we didn't bring anything to stuff it!" they exclaimed. Taking my stocking from the mantel, I peered inside. "No, my dear, you did fill it. You're all here reminiscing, laughing, and playing. You're filling it now with the essence of Christmas. You're filling it with love." With hugs and kisses exchanged, we wished each other Merry Christmas. Ellen lingered in our embrace a bit longer than expected, but it felt natural, and for a moment it was as if we were still one big happy family. As the kids realized there were probably presents under the tree, the excitement of childhood Christmases flooded back. Gifts were exchanged, the feast was enjoyed, and after the dishes were cleared, the guitars came out for our customary Christmas jam session. As the night grew late, we began to retire to our respective sleeping quarters. Ellen moved towards the hall closet to retrieve her coat. "Thank you for being so kind to me today. I really appreciate spending Christmas Day with you and the kids. I know I have myself to blame, but of all the things I gave up, I miss the family time the most. Well, the kids are all grown and on their own now. This gathering would be just as rare even if we were still together," I responded, acknowledging the bittersweet reality of our situation. "I understand, but I also miss the quality time we used to share as just the two of us. You know, the time when it was just us as a couple. I suppose I'm finally apologizing to you. I really messed up what could have been a great life for both of us. Don't be so hard on yourself. We always encouraged our kids to pursue their dreams, to find happiness. And you did just that. We still have fulfilling lives. They're just different now." She gave me a disbelieving look. "So you're telling me you don't value what we had? After today, you don't feel any nostalgia? Regret for what we've lost?" "Ellen, we had today, and it was wonderful. What exactly do you think we've lost?" "We lost each other. I lost you. And I'll never forgive myself for it. And it seems like you couldn't care less." Tears streamed down her face. I wrapped my arm around her, and she broke down completely. I had already shed my tears when she first arrived, but I felt a pang of sadness seeing her like this on Christmas Day. Once she calmed down, I reminded her of our college days when she had ended things with me. She had been worried that things were getting too serious too quickly, and needed time to decide if she truly wanted a lifelong commitment to one person. I recounted how hurt I had been when she left, but that I couldn't bear to be with someone who wasn't fully committed to me. I explained how I had given myself a mourning period after our marriage ended and had emerged ready to embrace life again. Today, she was a beautiful part of my life, and for that, I was grateful. I remained composed, which helped calm her tears. I asked her to spend the night, set up the studio bed, and provided her with one of my t-shirts and a robe. Returning upstairs after securing the house, I heard her crying, doubting she would sleep. Nonetheless, I slept soundly. The following day felt like an extension of Christmas, and Ellen was delighted when we urged her to stay the entire weekend. We avoided discussing our past while the kids were around, but I noticed familiar expressions from our marriage in Ellen's eyes. There were the "I love you so much" and "you're wonderful" smiles. I even responded to a few silent requests for hugs and kisses. We seemed to understand each other as we did when we were married. At meals, she poured her coffee and I added just the right amount of milk. I buttered my pancakes and she applied the perfect amount of maple syrup. We completed each other's sentences. However, we slept in separate rooms. After the children departed together, leaving my daughter to visit Boston with the boys and then head to Vermont for skiing, Ellen and I were alone in our jointly owned home. I tended to the fire while she opened a bottle of wine. We sat and conversed, reminiscing, joking, and eventually delving into serious matters. "I acted foolishly, wrongly, and cruelly. I understand I can never fully make amends, and I don't expect your forgiveness, but I do want to apologize. I hope we can at least be friends again. You weren't just my husband. You were my best friend, my confidant, my most trusted ally, my partner in mischief, and I miss every part of you dearly." I smiled at her, and the floodgates opened. Ellen spoke eloquently, recounting how she fell into boredom, realizing now that she had pushed me away to create the passionless void we both endured. She described the excitement of meeting a flattering younger man and the temptation of a clandestine affair. She admitted to demonizing me to justify her actions, portraying me as the villain when she was the one behaving monstrously. Her narrative oscillated between the thrill of betrayal and anger that I didn't fight for her, that I seemed indifferent and allowed her to slip away. She confessed to feeling jealous of my life when I bounced back and resumed the lifestyle I enjoyed before we met, especially when she saw another woman riding on the back of my Harley. Her jealousy turned to rage as she witnessed me with different women, each offering something she perceived as superior to what she had given me. Her emotional state plummeted after the divorce was finalized, discovering that her younger lover had a pattern of dating married women until they were single, then discarding them. It seemed he enjoyed spending their husband's money ever since his father, a traditionalist who strongly disapproved of his son's affair-breaking habits, disowned him and cut him off from his trust funds. She struggled to find another prospect after the breakup. It appeared that the eligible men her age were either already taken or unwilling to commit to a woman who had cheated on her loyal first husband. While there were plenty of men willing to buy her drinks, dance with her, or spend the night, there were no lasting options. Younger men were content to date her. After all, she maintained her attractiveness and allure when she chose to engage. However, they weren't interested in a long-term relationship with someone going through menopause. Starting a family under those circumstances posed a challenge. I listened to her vent until she ran out of steam. I poured us both another glass of wine and handed hers to her with a smile. Well, from what you've told me, I suppose you made some pretty foolish choices. But you don't owe me anything. As I mentioned before, you pursued your desires, and I loved you enough to let you go. I wished I could have captured her expression at that moment. It was clear she hadn't anticipated my response being tied to my love for her. I forgave you almost immediately. How could I hold you in a marriage when you wanted out? I couldn't keep you confined or restricted. If I had forbidden something, you would have simply hidden it from me and proceeded anyway. Though your note may have seemed harsh initially, looking back, it streamlined things for us. We avoided property disputes and didn't have to worry about custody since our children were grown. I should thank you for that. So, I'm no longer your husband, and it may take some time before you consider me a best friend or advisor. Trust is certainly an issue for me, but if you're willing to trust my advice, that label is yours to decide. Partners in crime might be a bit too romantic for where we are now, but how about we just call ourselves friends? Tears welled up in her eyes as she melted into my embrace. She decided to stay another night. But no, let's not go there. We slept separately. We simply had a lot to catch up on. It seemed we were comfortable sharing the parenting role again. The following day, she went home to prepare for a New Year's trip to join the kids in Boston. I had gigs lined up all week. It's a highly lucrative time for musicians. The added benefit was that my focus was on my music, and Ellen hardly crossed my mind. With the start of the new school term after New Year's, my schedule left little room to see Ellen. Our paths crossed next at an in-service conference in April. We ended up sitting beside each other and found ourselves sharing a table for lunch. We had a delightful conversation, centered around my daughter's upcoming marriage in Australia. It seemed we were reverting to our roles as friends. Towards the end of the lunch, she thanked me for treating her well, both that day and at Christmas. She expressed happiness that we could move forward as friends, and then asked me for a favor. She blushed, hesitated a bit, and finally stammered out a request to go for a ride on the Harley one Saturday. I responded eagerly, affirming that Sunday was forecasted to be warm and beautiful with no prior commitments. I suggested we take a ride up north, stop for a pleasant lunch, and relish some time in the fresh air. She was cheerful and animated. Memories of her on the bike with me when we were younger flooded back. Those days always ended with passionate moments inspired by hours of her holding on to me from behind as we rode, her hands exploring my chest and, well, you can imagine without further detail. She always joked about the next time we'd go for a ride with something powerful between her legs, and the motorcycle was nice too. I wasn't sure if I could resist her. And I was right. I couldn't. We rode up to the falls, and I felt her hands wander. We hiked to the top of the falls and followed the long trail through the woods back down to the bike. We stopped in a quaint little town and wandered the streets, browsing antique shops. It was the type of day I typically detested, but spending time with this woman, who I had always seen as beautiful in every way, made it enjoyable. Lunch was delightful. By dinner time, we had returned south and stopped at a charming seafood dock for dinner. With candlelight, delicious food, and the gentle lapping of waves at the dock, it was evident she was being treated to a special evening. I took her home, to my home, our home. I took her to bed, our bed, my bed. Yes, we made love this time. It seemed we were now sharing the role of lovers together. We continued seeing each other for dinner and a movie the following week, and yes, we made love again. We even had lunch together a couple of times. However, we never discussed where our relationship was heading. The idea of exclusivity didn't cross either of our minds. Our daughter's wedding was approaching rapidly. We had meticulously gone over all the details, and I had proudly covered all the expenses without complaint. The band had made good money playing at festivals. We had paid off the mortgage while still married, had minimal credit card debt, and I had a stable full-time job with a top-tier salary and no dependents to support. While I wasn't swimming in wealth, I was comfortable and had savings in the bank. The only detail we hadn't shared was our travel plans. We had each made separate arrangements, but we were both staying at the hotel where all the guests would gather. When we compared notes, we realized we were booked on the same flight. I invited her to meet me at my house and share the car I had hired to take us to the airport. On the day of the trip, Ellen arrived early. I had barely rinsed out the coffee pot and started the dishwasher with the breakfast dishes when the car pulled into the driveway. Our driver swiftly took us to JFK. After checking our bags curbside, we headed into the terminal together. Since there weren't many direct flights from JFK to Sydney that day, the check-in counter wasn't crowded, and we joined the line together. I stepped up after Ellen, and the counter attendant asked why I hadn't used the shorter line for first-class passengers. Although I had purchased a first-class ticket due to the long flight duration, I typically opted for cheaper fares and hadn't realized the benefits included express check-in. The ticket agent found it amusing and directed me to the first-class lounge. Ellen was waiting for me there, and we cleared security together before heading to the lounge. At the desk, I checked in, and the attendant didn't question Ellen's entry with a coach ticket, but offered to upgrade her to first class to sit next to me. Call me sentimental or whatever else you like, but something about flying halfway around the world with the mother of my daughter to attend her wedding in first-class seats that reclined into beds while she cramped in coach with no leg room just didn't sit right with me. When we boarded the plane by rows, I made her wait with me. Initially annoyed and worried about losing her seat to a standby passenger, she began to work up a fuss. I explained that I had checked her in when we arrived at the lounge, diffusing her irritation. Of course, any remaining annoyance vanished completely when she was seated beside me in first class, and I presented the mother of the bride rationale. Her mood shifted to a degree that had me briefly entertaining thoughts of joining the Mile High Club. But don't be absurd, dear reader. Public displays of affection aren't my style, especially not in the confines of an airplane lavatory. We landed in Sydney, and the week was pure magic. We toured, visited, and best of all, witnessed my daughter embark on her own marriage journey. I can't express enough how proud I felt uttering my sole line, "Her mother and I do," as I gave her away after walking her down the aisle. At the reception, I escorted Ellen and savored the customary dances. Among the evening's highlights was when her brothers and I joined the band for a spirited rendition of All American Girl, our musical tribute to our little girl. Following the festivities, Ellen, the boys, and I convened in the hotel lounge. One of them cut to the chase. "So what's going on with you two?" "Nothing new, sweetie," Ellen replied. "Your dad and I are simply embracing our roles as your parents. We've moved past our past and are relishing life. Is that all right with you?" "Yeah, Mom, it just seems like more than that. It seems like you're getting close again. Maybe even, I don't know, getting back together." "Honey, I'm not oblivious. I had a moment of insanity a while back and made a foolish mistake." "All right, I was foolish then. Incredibly foolish. I own up to that, and I accept the consequences. Your dad and I have discussed it, and what he said is true. Just like we always taught you, I made a decision. I left the relationship, and I accept the consequences." The boys turned to me for input. Having nothing further to contribute, I sat there with a smile, savoring a delightful local Australian ale. "Come on, Dad," Mom answered the question. "Do we get to hear from you?" "Boys, you should be grateful we didn't spend the week here hurling hurtful remarks at each other. I hear that's what divorced couples often do at events like this. Beyond that, I believe your inquiry generally delves into my romantic life, which is off limits. Didn't I teach you not to kiss and tell? So why would I? But Dad, you love Mom. It's obvious to all of us. And we're both old enough to understand when a girl says she wants to be just friends. So without giving me nightmares and unpleasant mental images of your love life, just tell us, are you and Mom more than just friends? Son, given our history, if we're friendly, it will always surpass mere friendship. She's the love of my life, the mother of my children, and the greatest friend I've ever had. It's one of those things humans can't simply switch on or off. Beyond that, I can't provide an answer, because that part of our life story has yet to be written. We chatted a bit longer before retiring to our respective rooms. Just as I had slipped into my pajamas, there was a knock on the door. It was Ellen. I welcomed her in, and we climbed into bed. She expressed gratitude for the first-class upgrade, and before I could catch my breath, she began thanking me for the wonderful week we'd had. She thanked me for approaching my daughter's wedding as a team, and for what I had told the boys in the lounge. Exhausted from the onslaught of gratitude, I could barely keep up. She stayed for breakfast, which I ordered from room service. The journey home felt like a dream. Upon arriving at my house before she left, Ellen gave me a deep kiss. "I want you to know that I'm here for you, whatever you want, whenever you want." Somewhere along the line, I forgot why I loved you. Somewhere in the routine of being an adult, I forgot how much I loved you. Leaving you was the biggest mistake I could have made. I threw away the most precious thing I could ever have. Hurting you will always be the biggest regret of my life, and I wish I could turn back the clock. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, just let me know. Need a tennis partner? Call me. Need a roadie? Groupie? Backup singer? I'm your girl. Need a lover? I'm your woman. Whether it's having lovemaking, abusing me, or making love to me, I'm there. Need a meal cooked? I'll do it. I'll clean, fold your laundry, do the dishes and windows. I'll never ask or expect exclusivity. I know I gave that up. But if you ever ask, the answer is yes. Friend, girlfriend, mistress, lover, wife, just ask. Thank you for being you. You're wonderful, and if you ever decide to settle down with someone else, count on me to let her know what she has, and that she better make you happy, or I'll be waiting. That's really sweet of you, Ellen. I've been so happy that we've been able to reconnect. I'm just not sure I'm comfortable putting labels on us. I don't know where we're headed. I'm just glad we're on this journey together, at least part of the time. I've spent my whole life living with women and usually doing their bidding. First my mom and sister, then right after college, marrying you. I kind of enjoy living in a home where I determine the colors and clutter levels. I like cooking my own food the way I like it, and having the fridge stocked with my favorites. I love playing in the band, and I have to admit, having an open lovemaking life has been good for me. I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. Do you remember the note I wrote in response to your letter? Yes, you said I was right, thanked me, and said goodbye. You didn't even sign it love. I meant every word in that note. You were right. We were stagnant and needed a change. The thank you and goodbye were sincere. Anything about love would have felt insincere and out of place. Anything else I could have said would have either been spiteful or made me seem like a pathetic beggar. I'm not good at that. So I wrote what needed to be said and left it at that. What needs to be written now, Tom? Not a thing. I've shown you everything you need to know. Yes, you have. You've shown me that you care. You've shown me you still find me attractive and hot even. You've shown me you want me. You stand by me where the children are concerned. You've shown you love me more than a casual lover, enough even to share dinner and breakfast. You enjoy my company enough to date me. You respect me and our history enough to upgrade me to first class, pay for our daughter's wedding completely without asking a cent from me, and to declare to our sons that I'm the love of our life. The only thing that seems to be missing is a more full-time role, being your wife. I want you to know I understand that and will never press you on that topic. I know I gave that right away, but understand that if you ever choose to ask, the answer is yes in advance, and I'll be praying every day of my life for the chance to say it. With that, she kissed me goodnight. Sure, I considered what she said. But come on, let's be realistic. I may be whipped, but why settle for just one? I had everything I could want. My own home, grown children, financial security, an ex-wife dedicated to winning me back who admitted she'd do anything anytime, a fit body with all my hair, a successful band and a Harley, and a steady stream of women vying to ride on the back of my bike and join me for after-parties. Sure, I loved Ellen enough, and there was that idea of having someone to share my golden years with. But really, maybe I'd change my mind when we hit 60, but not now. I didn't pen a Dear Jeff letter, so I didn't feel accountable for any consequences. I'd forgiven her, made amends, and my life was in order. So I dialed the number of that busty blonde who hopped on my Harley after the street festival and became my first post-divorce fling. She giggled when I asked if she was serious about never hearing from me again. Assuring me she was okay and up for a rendezvous, she invited me over. Even as I revved up the Harley to head to her place, I knew someday I'd propose to Ellen again, but that day wasn't today.